So I want to just pivot because we got this. We're going to have debates, which I think
Hmm.
was not a. I mean, I think it would have been hard to imagine having no debates, but I think it was definitely a possibility. Joe Biden comes out, challenges Donald Trump to a debate. One's in June. We've never had that
Yeah.
before. I mean, it's before they're actually the nominees. And then one in September. And I can understand the idea, like we want to do this before early balloting happens.
Hmm.
Although I I suspect that's not actually the reason. I'm not sure I know the actual reason, to be honest with you. But it could be before early balloting, but it's hard to imagine that, you know, the debate is going to change anybody's mind per se. But I can't help but think that really the reason, the idea behind having it in June is because I think I am of the mind that the trial is actually helping Donald Trump only because it's keeping him off the campaign trail. And like, unless you're like, there's the stories about Trump are about everybody around him except for Trump. All Trump
Hmm.
gets is that 60 seconds out in front saying the same old thing over again, as opposed to like, let the American public see this guy
Yeah,
out there again and get it. Remember
I
what,
agree with you. I
why he
agree.
was voted out. And I have a feeling that the Biden people want to get him back in the news early as possible.
I agree. I mean, and I agree totally with the idea that him being kept off the campaign trail, him just doing these sort of canned, you know, uh, press avails, not even avails, these sort of little, you know, statements in the hallway at the courthouse. I think that's helping him. I do think that helps him because, I mean, if you don't, people have, and this is showing up in the polling all over the place, that, you know, that people have some weird sense of nostalgia about the good old days when Donald Trump was president. And that's because they've forgotten what it was like when Donald Trump was president. It was not good. His approval rating was terrible through his entire presidency. I mean, not that Biden's is any better, but it's not like, you know, Trump's was great and everybody was just super happy. And so they need to be reminded of that. And I think you're right. I hadn't thought about that, but I think maybe, I'm sure that's part of the calculation, that they need to get him out there. Then people need to see him, because the fact is that if you do see him at his, you know, I watched his whole rally over the weekend, and he is, you know, he's not the same person that he was 8 years ago. He is not, his act is not as fresh, let's just put it that way. And he does not seem to be, you know, very together in terms of, you know, his, I don't know if it's the stress or his age or he's got something wrong with him or whatever, but he does not present the way that he did. And I think that when people need to be reminded of just how, you know, what a train wreck this guy is. And, you know, I think Biden will do fine in the debates. You know, he's actually not bad. And I mean, Biden's, you know, kind of a terrible, you know, speech maker, and in a lot of ways, but he's pretty good in debates. I mean, I remember that in I guess it was 2008, that, you know, he was the one who got off the line about Rudy Giuliani. That was, you know, sort of stuck with him, a noun, a verb, and 9/11. You know, he
Right.
said, you know, he can be pretty good. And Trump, of course, will not prepare and won't know what's going on. And, you know, hopefully the debate has been structured in a way, which it sounds like that Biden really did get what they needed on that, by, you know, they
No
apparently
audience.
no audience, which is really important. And also the idea that they can cut off the mics, because Trump was absolutely outrageous in the last debate that he had with Biden in the 2020 debates. So, you know, I think it's a good idea. And I think it's good, you know, that Biden's polling bumped up after the State of the Union when people saw that he wasn't really drooling and falling down on his face, which is what they, you know, everybody was anticipating. And apparently, I just read this today, that, you know, Google searches on Biden and age dropped precipitously
Oh yeah.
after
That was the
the
one thing
State of
that
the Union.
the State of the Union did for him, is it changed that
Right.
that whole narrative. And so what do you make about having it so early, though? I mean, if part of it is this idea, it's, and you know, someone just I am saying that maybe this is a function of, like, you know, getting locked in the DNC, for the DNC convention.
Yeah,
but
it's
there's
locked in. I mean,
it's
yeah,
locked in.
it's locked in. That's
There's
not going to
no.
happen.
I mean, look at the numbers that he's getting in these primaries, and
Yeah, no, it's
it's
not
really
happening.
uncommitted is really been the biggest challenger to him. And that is, largely a function of the, well, not largely, it's totally a function of, I think,
Yeah.
of what's going on in Gaza. But that is, if anything, I think it's more they want the ability to take part of that convention online and have it much less relevant in
That's interesting. That's interesting.
for TV, because I think they rightly are concerned about protests.
For sure, for sure.
I mean, Biden is speaking at Morehouse this weekend.
Yeah.
At the commencement, and the president of Morehouse has said, "I'm not going to call the cops on protesters. I'm asking people not to protest, because if they protest, we're going to stop the commencement.
Right.
We're just going to stop it right in its tracks and walk away." And my God, I mean, if I'm Biden's people, I'm like, can't we just do the cops keep people from coming in, or can't we search everybody? Or and I don't know if that commencement's going to go through, and it's going to be, it's going to create, hopefully, I want there to be as much pressure on Biden about this as possible, but I would imagine they don't want this with the convention. They want as little attention on the conventions as possible.
Sure.
And
there's also another thing, and I think you're right about that. I think they are trying. I hadn't thought of it, but you're absolutely right. They are trying to make the convention less relevant, and maybe less of a television event, so that they can preclude any kind of big disturbances that could shake things up. There will be protests, whether they like it or not, and they will be covered, whether they like it or not. So that's happening. The media is not going to ignore the protests. They just aren't. So I don't think that that's necessarily going to work. But they'll do what they can, I guess, to try and keep it from being the main story. But I also think there's another thing, which is also part of the polling, which is that a lot of people have not been convinced that Donald Trump is actually going to be the nominee for whatever reason, whether they're not paying attention, or they don't really understand how politics works, or they think that there's some kind of mystery or suspense about whether or not Trump is actually running. Maybe it has to do with the trials. Some people think, if he gets convicted, then he can't run or something. So I think the Biden people find in their polling that for those who have not been convinced that Trump is going to run, if they become convinced, they get sober up real fast and make a decision to run to go to Biden. So they may want to do that, to just have it be a formal kind of
get Trump out there early, so that you're not waiting until October till people realize that there's an election going on.
Yeah,
because it has been. I mean, that to me makes a lot of sense, because I have to say that, like, this now being 04, 08, 12, 16, 20, this being the sixth presidential election, and you're in the same boat. This is our sixth one in this sort of like business, as it were. And I don't recall one having this little interest. Like, I mean, sort of around the, and part of it is because the primary really never developed on either side in any real meaningful way. And we've never had two presidents before, and two people that I think are so sort of like universally disdained in some fashion, or unpopular. And it just seems like people are just staying away and ignoring this, which, at any other time, I would have been like, good, we should only have a 5-month, 4-month presidential election instead of this like 6-year one that we have. But from the perspective of the Biden campaign, I would imagine they're running on a referendum about Donald Trump. And it's much harder to have a referendum about Donald Trump where he's only on TV for 4 seconds a day. in the same courtroom every week. I mean, that's got to be, I think that's got to be part of it. But let me ask you this in terms of the way that Biden's running, because there was also a story. I mean, that Times poll that came out, they really hyped the registered voters instead of their own voter model. And, you know, everybody's got voter models and no one knows what it is. And their voter model was, they were predicting record turnout relative to 2020. And again, it's hard to believe that there's going to be more excitement than there was in 2020 because, like I say, nobody wants either one of these candidates.
I really think that's off base.
I just, if it's possible, it's possible. I mean, who knows?
I'm not. It could be.
And but if you look at like the aggregate of the polls, they're more or less tied. It seems like.
That's what they are.
But one of the things that I find a little bit disturbing is that there's a lot of talk out of the Biden campaign that they just don't believe they're in any type of trouble whatsoever. And who knows? Again, you know, the demographics could determine it. The cohorts that Biden won with last time, he's got a lot of margin to, you know, if he won 65-35, you know, 18 to 35s last time, he could still win with 55-45 because there's just so many more of those people.
Right.
Because that generation's gotten so much bigger. But what do you think about the campaign he's running? Because it seems to me there is a huge missed opportunity when you look at those splits in that New York Times thing. All of the Democratic senators running in these swing states are crushing it. Relative, you know, these are the most vulnerable Democrats.
Surprising. Yeah,
it's surprising, but it's consistent with what you said earlier about the way that Democrats are performing in the special elections and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't Biden running against the biggest do-nothing Congress in the history of do-nothing Congresses? Like every day, we just played that clip from what, you know, James Comer was doing. Why are they not running against that Congress on some level? It's like they're afraid to take the focus off of Trump, but he's not around right now.
Right. And this is a perfect opportunity because the Congress is run against Marjorie Taylor Greene, run against Mike Johnson, run against Matt Gaetz. I mean, who likes those people? I mean, other
Lauren
than a small...
Boebert.
Yeah, Lauren, but these are clowns. They're completely, you know, outrageous, kind of performance artists there in the Congress. And I agree with you. You know, I mean, it's like a Harry Truman sort of a thing, you know, where you come out run against the do-nothing Congress. And that is a story I think that people are aware of. I mean, from what I can gather, the Republican Congress, the House, is extremely unpopular, in the polling. I mean, this is not a group of people that I don't even think Republicans like these people. At least not, they love Donald Trump, but they don't love Marjorie Taylor Greene or even Mike Johnson or Matt Gaetz. So I think you're right. I think that is a missed opportunity because, I mean, it's one of the things, if you want to run a referendum campaign, you can run the Trump is a given, and that will unfold as the rest of the campaign comes. But right now they do have that Congress that's right out there making fools of themselves every single day. And they're tied directly to Donald Trump. It's not like it's some kind of a separate thing. You can make that case. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't know that they actually believe that they don't have any trouble in the polling. I find that hard to believe.
I find it hard to believe that too.
I'm
but
sure
they're not doing anything.
No,
as far as I can tell about it.
What they're doing, and there is, they are putting together a very, huge ground operation with offices open everywhere all over the country, and they're hiring tons of people and that kind of stuff. So there is some under the radar sort of stuff that's going on. But on the surface, no, I mean, you're not seeing it, and you're not seeing the energy, I think, that what we really need to see, this kind of energy that, look, this is really serious, folks, and we are out here and we're going to work hard for all your votes. Now, Biden is spending a lot of time in the swing states. I mean, he's been in Wisconsin. He's been living up there so far, and in Michigan, and Pennsylvania too. I mean, those 3 states are vital. He has to win them or he loses. I mean, that just goes without saying. So they are working them, but you're just not feeling that kind of energy. And I agree with you. I think there are ways to go about this with Trump being in the position that he's in that could be quite effective in garnering attention of the voting public. And
it seems to me too that one element of why that excitement is sort of muted, or excitement may be the wrong word, or sense of urgency is we look at the polling in terms of Biden's policy regarding Israel, and the polling itself, the first order, getting votes doesn't seem like it's a massive problem for him there. But what I think is sort of not clear is what it's doing to the activist class, the people who are in charge of these organizations, and the people who are the ones who are supposed to be like, in the absence of what's going on with the Biden administration in Israel right now, I'd be talking about cutbacks on new leases for coal. I'd be talking about the liquid natural gas pause on the export facilities. We would be maybe pushing a little bit more on the student debt relief, and marking where it's happened in some instances. I mean, there would be a whole host of things that we would be talking about. Because on a domestic standpoint, like, you and I have been through this a lot of times. It's hard to point to a president in our lifetime that has done better, and certainly in terms of like labor and antitrust. But it's really hard to, trumpet those things where he's engaged in something so blatant as, setting up these sort of like, I don't know, very, very faded red lines that seem to sort of dissolve about Israel's behavior, and trying to sort of both sides this with his donors, or his own ideological marriage to this project. But it's extremely difficult to do, and I think that's where it's very hard to quantify that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you, I went to a fundraiser not long ago, a couple of weeks ago, for one of the, it was one of those resistance groups that, came up after Trump was elected. And they're, by the way, they're still out there, and they're still doing their work of registering voters and getting people out. But I was at this fundraiser, and the person was there from the group. I might as well name the group. It's called Flip the Vote, which is, they go into these swing states and are trying to flip votes in there. But, I'm in a group of people. I'm on the west side of LA, pretty liberal place. Everybody's, but, these were all people who were just sort of, not particularly politically engaged. And I'm telling you, the Gaza thing was a hugely contentious issue in this group of people. And that had an effect on the person who was doing the presenting, because you could see that they were kind of going, wow, this is an issue. Now, granted, I'm in a very liberal place. There was a lot of probably more informed people than you might find around in your average swing state. I don't know.
But that's the point of activism. I mean, that's the point. The activist class who are doing this are the most informed, and they're the ones who are probably dealing with this more than anybody else.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, this was a very contentious discussion that was had. People were, kind of emotional about it. And this is a group that goes into these, it's the activists in the swing states who are out there trying to convince people. If they are, demoralized in some way, or find themselves just, maybe I got something else to do with my life right now. I'm going to go, or maybe they go protest, or maybe they just do something else and decide not to do this. Now, I agree with you that so far I see a separation between the protests, which I think are sincerely and genuinely out there to change policy. This is an action to change policy, and I think it's having an effect. I think that it has had an effect. I think it gives, to the extent that Joe Biden wants to do anything, that's very helpful to have a very vocal group out there making this demand on him. It makes it easier for him to do that if he wants to. We don't know to what extent he wants to.
To some extent, it forces him, I think,
Yeah,
because it's
it
created
does.
a panic amongst like a lot of the lawmakers too.
That's right. And it's very important that, that is the function of it's the old apocryphal story that FDR said, when they came in and made the demand, he said, we'll go out and make me do it. Well, that's what protests are about. These sort of internecine arguments that happen is to do that. Having said that, I don't see any sort of sense that people are in great numbers confusing their strong feelings on that with their knowledge that Donald Trump is, a fascist nightmare, and that, they would instead vote for him. I don't see that happening, but there could be a fall off in voter participation, and that just been in this situation, because it's like you said, the polls show a tie, and I don't get the sense that that's going to change a whole lot over the course. I mean, a lot of this is just baked in. We're doing a rerun of 2020.
Well,
so,
there is a difference, and we don't have time to talk about it, but maybe next time you're here. And that is RFK's running mate just gave him another $10 million.
Oh, yeah.
This is sort of like very reminiscent of when I think it was David Koch bought his way onto the Libertarian vice presidential ticket back in I think it was in 1980, maybe, or 82. I think it was 80. And she is, she's a member of a one-person club, and the dues are very, very high.
Yes, they are. But she's got it. She's got it. She's got the money.
She's got the money, and if you're going to spend that kind of money in politics, you might as well take a vice presidential nomination. Sure. But he's going to be on a bunch of ballots, and
yes,
I don't think he's going to be in the debate, but maybe somebody's going to invite him to a debate. I don't know.
Trump wants him on. He says, "Come on,"
and I don't know that Biden does, but that's the one thing that is also different. And this is not a rerun in that way, because this is gonna have some implications. Because even if
I'd love to talk to you about this, because I know you know him, and it would be very interesting to me to hear your take on how. I
don't know if I have any insights on it. We've talked about it a little bit around here, but at the end of the day, I do think that, even with this vote to force Biden to fund Israel more, essentially, Biden can't tie the Republican Party to Donald Trump, or he won't. And it seems to me to be a huge mistake. But
absolutely,
we'll have to pick this up later. Okay. Heather, as always, a real pleasure.
Oh, thanks for having me, Sam. Have a great weekend, everybody.
You too.